Hey everyone, welcome to the Cathy Reisenwitz Show. I'm joined today a little bit early by the ever flexible and super accommodating Robert Kruger. Thank you so much for coming on. You said you wanted to talk about something specific today. Tell me about that.
Well, I have run into on a couple occasions some younger members of the Liberty Movement who are persuaded by the logic and reason of the anarcho-capitalist position, and they are coming into difficult times with their parents and their siblings and so on, and how to deal with the coming out, so to speak, of being an anarchist. Obviously, it has a lot of parallels with other types of situations where, let's say, you might have a person who considers themselves homosexual or considers themselves an atheist, and they have a parent who is disapproving of these particular positions, and they will try to coax the child into a different position or threaten the child with other types of restrictions and things of that nature. And so it's a interesting conundrum as to how does an anarcho-capitalist or an anarchist deal with a parent who is disapproving of their position when they are a young person. And so I thought it would be a good idea for us to actually talk about, the similarities with some of these other cultural phenomena like, homosexuality or atheism, and the parental issues, and anything that might be unique about the arrangement of being an anarchist, and if there is something special about it. I don't know. It's just an interesting, situation that you have to deal with in those cases where you are a young person who doesn't exactly have full liberty to express your mind or your own thoughts, where you kind of are dependent upon a parental figure to provide for you and so on. So just wanted to kind of, first pick your brain about it, and if you have any insights, that come to mind off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My mom was not super thrilled when I told her I was an anarchist. I mean, you get kind of a mixed reaction where, on the one hand, it's a little bit dismissive. That's silly, and then on the other hand, there's I think parents worry like, does this mean my kid's like dangerous, or have they gotten caught up in some kind of cult, or are they going to start throwing Molotov cocktails or defacing buildings? So no, and I think the atheist parallel is probably the closest one. I mean, since I've moved to DC and stopped participating in organized religion, anti-atheist sentiment kind of surprises me. Like, I see how silly it is, but it's very real. There was a survey out pretty recently that said that atheists are one of the most disliked groups of people, that people really would hate for their children to bring home an atheist, and atheists have trouble getting elected. So I mean, on the one hand, as people who don't participate in religion, organized religion, and as anarchists, it might seem silly that people would discriminate, or that people would be afraid. It's real. I think we need to take it seriously. And I think some of the same things apply. I mean, part of the, and this is something that I used to argue with my friend Igor about, part of the reason that people don't like atheists is because it's kind of like why people don't like feminists and why people don't like anarchists. The loudest ones are the craziest and most annoying.
Hmm.
So
Yes,
part of it is, go ahead.
I was just agreeing.
Yeah. So part of it is just kind of not being that person. I mean, it's sad that you would have to say, I'm not like them. I'm a reasonable person. I believe in property rights. I'm not going to go around smashing buildings. But if you're a young person or an older person coming out as an anarchist, you shouldn't have to do all that, but you probably will, to clarify, what you believe, that you're nonviolent, that you want to see the state overthrown peacefully, gradually, voluntarily.
Well, I think that one of the big, similarities between the atheist experience and the anarchist experience is that in the atheist experience, your parents believe that you're going to be sent to hell if you fight this God religion thing, and the similar case being you're going to go to jail if you fight this government, religious thing, and it is a very dangerous thing in their minds that you're risking your entire soul or your entire livelihood or future career and all this type of thing, and they're trying to protect the child. They're trying to make sure that the child is achieving some lofty goal of becoming an independent, growing person of substance who's going to contribute to society and be a positive, positively involved in society and so on. And they see this as a threat to that concept by being against what their personal belief system says. This is a requirement in order to be a really productive person in your particular society. So yes, that is definitely a concern, and I suppose there comes a point where if your parents are too rigid in their particular thinking, if you can't reason with them, you might have to live in a closet, so to speak, until you reach the age of majority, and then can move on from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of not being an asshole, is if somebody's not comfortable with talking about statelessness, then don't talk about statelessness.
Yeah.
Should they be comfortable? Yes. Sometimes they're not. Put it on the back burner. There are plenty of people online that you can talk about statelessness with. Don't force it on people. But I think the whole good person thing angle, really needs to be explored, because it's something that I think people don't think critically enough about, and that is the deeply embedded nationalism that we all grow up buying, and that most of our parents are still thoroughly entrenched in, that voting is a privilege / a requirement, that to be a good person involves being a good citizen, that we're all in this together, this America, God and country, patriotism thing, that when you reject, people feel like you're not a part of things, you're not keeping up your end of the bargain, that you're ungrateful, that that you're kind of a bad person, and that's what makes kind of atheism and anarchy fascinating, and can lead to some better patterns of thought when you examine that for what it is, and you look at what are the pros and cons of fealty to a nation state. But if you go right there and you're talking to people who haven't had that thought process yet, you're going to bring up some emotions that I guess what I would tell a person who's thinking about coming out would just be to prepare for, like, be ready for those emotional reactions, because that patriotism, nationalism is the air we breathe, it's the culture we grow up in, it's in our public schools, it's in our libraries, it's in our songs and in our movies, and it's very, very difficult to overcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely 12 years of indoctrination that you're going to have, as well as all of the other topics that you brought up, as far as, like, in our media and the sporting events and so on. I mean, if you try to go to a bull riding event and not have the Pledge of Allegiance said, well, good luck. It's just not going to happen. And I'm guessing it's the same as for a football event. I've never been to one, but I would certainly love to. But I'm pretty sure that you're going to do, the Star Spangled Banner or something, and this whole, allegiance to America mindset is really ingrained in our culture. Now, the interesting point that you brought up is that a lot of people will have negative associations with people that come from a particular bent, and specifically atheists being, the idea that, well, I'm not going to be very pleased if my child ends up wanting to date an atheist, for example. Um, and I find that a lot of that comes from the fact that it is still considered somewhat of a fringe concept in American society. And what you'll find in fringe groups that have figured out some sort of leap forward in liberty is that the initial proponents of it have figured it out because, well, they didn't exactly spend all their time hanging around drinking at keggers. They were isolated, and they had some time on their hands, and they started to figure out these things. They started to explore their sexuality in the homosexual environment, or they started to explore the question of why is it that women and men are considered not equals in the case of feminism? Why is it that blacks and whites are not considered equals in the case of the race card, the race issue? And in the case of the atheist movement, they didn't decide that they're going to go off to the church play or the church, choir group, and they decided that they're going to hang out on their own. They start to think about these things, and they have these times where they do some introspection and do some different thought. But they tend to be, in my experience, and there was a doctor who was talking about this on what was it called? The Thinking Atheist had a show where this doctor came on, and she was talking about this phenomenon where these groups where they start to get different thinking processes, they tend to be more associated with people who are less socially inclined, who have a little less of the skill set for being involved in social events, because they have more time on their hands, because they have the mindset to challenge the status quo. And what I'm thinking is that has two major factors. One being that the parents are going to view the people that come from that particular perspective as being outliers and miscreants, obtuse, unusual, odd, just people that they don't feel comfortable around and have a pent-up ickiness about it or whatever, because as a general rule, people who start these movements are not exactly the biggest social fish in the sea. Of course, as time passes by, you'll find that more and more socially adept people will join the movement because they've been persuaded to take a look at the situation and become more active. So, when people think of anarchists, they're going to think, Molotov cocktail throwing, crazy nut jobs, people like the people that killed the cops in Las Vegas. These ideas come to their minds, and they create a lot of fear that are associated with it, and that becomes a real issue to overcome. But then you also have the second part, which is, in all likelihood, the young libertarian, the young anarchist, who is in their parents' home, who's figured out this stuff, is likely a representative of this particular subset, where they may not have the socially, impressive qualities that other people might have, and so their parents might have had a fear of losing their child in that particular regard, that they think that their child is being isolated, not engaged, and when they're exploring a fringe idea, it really unnerves them on that regard as well. And it also means that the number of people that they can bring to bear to persuade the parent, hey, you know what, all I want to do is go to a big concert. Well, that's an easy one, because they've got all these friends that say, Joe's going, Jim's going, Julie's going, well, let's go have fun. That's an easy explanation. But when you say, yeah, these guys that I know on the internet, they're all about this, It doesn't exactly jive. So we've got a couple of different problems that occur there that really stress the situation for a parent, that makes them uncomfortable as to how to deal with the child who is exploring different opportunities of thought and may have a lack of what they consider to be the norm when it comes to social interaction. So, I mean, you discussed yourself the issue of having a difficult time with the moving away from your family, the changes that you went through there. Is there any insights that you might have had as far as, like, when you could bring up a discussion, or interactions that really worked out well for you?
I think you make a really interesting point about people, and who knows what the feedback mechanism is. It's a chicken or the egg argument. Do you get into books because you find social engagement not very rewarding, or are you not very good at social interaction because you are more fascinated by books and so you don't get a lot of practice? I'm sure it's both, but it kind of comes down to people are not really very rational, generally speaking, and that's something that I began to realize when I got into marketing, and have just had that proved to me again and again. And so, again, as people are evaluating statelessness, what they are judging it against is everything that they've been told about patriotism and love of country. And when people are evaluating, like you said, those fringe movements, they're associating it with the people who make them uncomfortable, right? And that's what social acuity really is. It's the ability to make someone feel comfortable. And so, no, I mean, I think you bring up a really great point that when movements or ideas are associated with discomfort for whatever reason, it's a huge stumbling block to getting them widely adopted. So I guess what I would say is, what I learned with talking to my parents has helped me in general, which is it's not so much what you say but how you say. If you come out first in favor of, if you defend statelessness with the most crazy, views that, for example, I do believe that there should be no prohibition on weapons. You can get your hands on nuclear arms. Like, I don't believe a state should get in your way. I don't trust the state with nuclear arms any more than, my average citizen. I wouldn't begin the conversation with that again.
Yeah, probably not the best one to approach. Everybody should have nukes. Why not?
Right. Or what we've talked about. Don't begin with taxation of slavery. These are just not places to begin the conversation with people. Another thing that I would say, and this is going to get really personal, but I was definitely one of those that, my parents had to force me to go to the school dance, and just super, super socially awkward. And, for me personally, when I put 5 minutes into understanding a new idea or learning a new skill, I got a lot out of it, or I felt like I got a lot out of it. When I put 5 minutes toward talking to my fellow middle schooler, I wanted to shoot myself in the face. So it's taken me a lot of, honestly, reading to understand that, hey, talking to people is a skill just like HTML. You have to practice it. Here are some tools and tips, and it's made my life immeasurably better to realize that, and to put work into it. And so that's another thing I would tell, especially people who, again, you've got the Hayek order of operations, where for some people, it's just they really don't need to put a lot into social interaction because they're digging deep into the data and they're honing the ideas. But even for the academic, some amount of social acuity is going to be important for, getting your books read and getting your articles evaluated. And so really, no matter where you are on the hierarchy, working on those skills is going to help those ideas. It's going to help those ideas get taken seriously, get considered. It's going to help you because, reading articles and reading books and stuff, I mean, that's all awesome, but it's really, really fun to find other people who have, slightly different ideas or radically different ideas and learn from them, in social interactions. So, it's a skill just like any other, and I would really challenge, people who are new to anarchy to work on that, because you're going to get the most out of these cool new ideas. The more you can more easily and more enjoyably work with other people.
Yeah, certainly parroting is not exactly what the whole point is. I mean, we're trying to learn how to be individuals and express our own thoughts about every different thing that we're going to deal with, and to create amicable relationships with each other and how we do that. So, I mean, it's the whole point is to figure out how to interact in a voluntary, peaceful society. Maybe they could just shut their mouth and go to Toastmasters for a few sessions, and then they can approach it or something, and actually all right, well, we could have a conversation now because I have the skills. Let's go for it. Um, but yeah, it's not an easy thing. You can't just approach a person and just lay it out there and barf this whole anarchism thing all over their face and just say, eat it up, buddy. No, it's just not going to happen. That's not the way it works. You got to be a little bit more subtle with your points. And I guess there was a conversation that I was listening to on one of the Voluntary Virtues Network podcasts that was out there. That just a recommendation on how to approach interactions with people. And the biggest thing that they said is to come up with points of agreement. And obviously, if we're dealing with a parent that is, let's say, a liberal mindset or Democrat slash progressive type of personality type thing, explaining your frustrations with the idea of there being the big fat pigs that are eating from the trough, that are crowding out all the little pigs and stopping them from being able to get what they need for their survival. And so, lobbying creates this situation where it stops the people who want to create their businesses and have them grow. Maybe that might be a perspective to go into, or that government is prohibiting people from providing charity to local unemployed people, where we had some examples in Florida where there was a guy who was giving out food and things like that, and they said, no, you can't do that unless you go through our organization and things. Explaining that you believe that the best way to help people is to provide them with an opportunity for growth instead of a ham sandwich. But then if you're dealing with the conservative types, I think that in that particular case, you're probably going to want to approach them with well, I found that the free market is just so much better at providing like mail and delivery services like the U.S. Postal Service compared to UPS or FedEx. It seems kind of stupid that there's any service or whatever, and you compare the analysis there, and you find some matching points, and you bring them up, and then you get them to agree that, yeah, I kind of agree with you that it seems silly that we should do X or whatever, and build some rapport there, and just leave it at that and let it simmer for a while. Don't.
No, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, don't really go full bore with trying to have the 8-hour conversation where it's really going to try to change their whole perspective. Bring the points of agreement to them with some little tidbits of thought that make them think, well, maybe I can take this a little bit further, and then leave it. Don't necessarily have that discussion all in one point.
Well, that's how you make friends. I mean, you don't make friends by coming up to somebody and saying, I'm going to put all this information on you and try to change who you are and what you believe. No, nobody wants to be friends with that. People want to be friends with, hey, I think you're right about these things, and here's where we can achieve our similar ends together, and I care about what you believe, and I think that it's interesting, and I want to understand you better. So everything that makes you more socially adept is going to make you more useful and convincing to spreading the ideas of anarchy as well, and to making anarchy kind of a safe place for people, because one of the biggest problems with anarchy is that no one wants to live in a society with nothing between them and the other anarchists.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to make that different. I think we need to make people excited about living with nothing in between us
Yeah.
and them, and for them to consider themselves us and us to consider ourselves them. But we only have a few minutes left, and I want to thank you first for coming on, Robert. This is a really great idea, something I hadn't really thought a lot about, and I think it's going to be really useful for people.
Yeah, I think
So before
so.
we go, where can people find you?
What's that?
Before we go, where can people find your work?
Oh, well, let's see. I'm doing 3 shows a week on the Voluntary Virtues Network. I'm the co-host of the Voluntary Virtues flagship show, which is on Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do a follow-up show with the remaining people who are going to hang on and talk about the things that we didn't completely evaluate at the end of that show, which starts at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we kind of just run until whenever we're done. And then I also have a new show, which is the Anarchist Experience, which is kind of a parallel to the atheist experience, and that is on Sundays from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we basically take conversations that we've had where people are asking questions about anarcho-capitalism, where they say, well, it can't work, or what their arguments are against it, and we show them how they're wrong. And we're working on getting it so that we can have a call-in show where we can actually have the discussion with people on live air, where they can call in. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Certainly, things will change as time passes by. I'm looking to try to get a radio show with Journalistic Revolution, things like that. Maybe doing some interviews with some of the local things that are going on in New Mexico, since we have a lot of cop violence going on and things like that. So, but that's where I'm at as it stands right now.
Fantastic. So really the question is, when are you not podcasting? That's a lot of
Well, when I'm trying to make some money. that's about it. Yeah, definitely. But I do try to facilitate or assist with anybody who does have any issues with the Voluntary Virtues Network. If they are missing, people to guests or something like that, I'll try to jump on and help them out as much as possible. So yes, definitely, I'm trying to help as much as possible.
Well, I really appreciate it today. Thank you so much, Robert.
Absolutely. I just as a laugh on a you helped me come up with an explanation as to why my OkCupid and situation has just not been working out. I just jumped right in and just said, oh well, let's just be 100% friends. Maybe I'm just laying too much out there in the beginning. So try to ease up a little bit, and we'll find a way to communicate a little bit less aggressively and actually make some headway. So space it out over time, I suppose.
On the next show, you'll give us an update on how that strategy is working for you.
Well, maybe I will. I don't know. I'm really not pursuing it, but I thought it was kind of a funny anecdote. Anyway, thank you for having me on your show, Cathy. It's been a great pleasure, and I think that this is a great topic. I think you might want to talk about it some more.
No, I think so, absolutely. All right. Thank you for coming on, Robert. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Cathy Reisenwitz Show.